to Before You Go, the official podcast of ABODE Contemplative Care for the Dying.
At ABODE, our vision is that we live in a world where death is not feared and we live fully until we die. And we'd like to make that happen before we go. I'm Mary Thorsby, ABODE's CEO.
I'm Natalie Buster, ABODE's end-of-life doula and yoga director. Welcome to Before You Go.
Hello, Natalie.
Hello, Mary.
It's a great day in San Antonio.
Oh my gosh, it's finally cool out, and I think we're going to get rain. It's very exciting. It's very exciting. It doesn't take a lot to get us excited, does it, Mary? Just give us some good weather. We can take long walks and bike rides.
Right. And our plants look a little nicer outside.
Yeah.
Well, I have Rosalind Carter on my mind today, and I love that she directed her life toward recognizing caregivers. And she has this wonderful quote that we use a lot. And I thought for a contemplative moment, we could think about it for a second. So she said, there are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. She speaks the truth.
Oh, absolutely.
It applies to all of us in one form or another, doesn't it?
And she would know, right? I mean, she had a heart of gold, and she gave so much care and love to her husband, and he to her, as much as he could. And, I think she just was one of those people that walk the walk.
She did. And her husband, President Jimmy Carter, is still on hospice. He's been on hospice it's been a year?
I think so. Around a year. And she was his caregiver, and she went first. So it just shows us that once again, we have no idea. No idea. Even if you're the caregiver in the family, that it takes a toll on you too. And I think that's what we'll really talk about today is the role of caregivers and just how much they take on, and what are some ways that they can take care of themselves, that we all, because as Rosalind said, we all are caregivers, or we will be one day, and how we can take care of ourselves, make sure that our cups are full. And then also, what are some of the slippery slopes of being a caregiver? Because it's not easy. And I don't know. I think, it's interesting to first take a look at some of the challenges that caregivers face. What comes to mind for you, Mary, when you think of challenges that caregivers face?
In so many cases, caregiving falls to a family member, and it's, in essence, a full-time job on top of their regularly paying jobs. And the caregiving job is typically unpaid. So I think caregiving can adversely impact folks who are working, who have a career path. It's time away from work. So in that realm, that definitely one of the biggest challenges is how do you afford to take care of your loved one when other types of caregiving may be out of your reach in terms of expenses. And then when it's left to you, you've got to juggle that with your career, with your family. And then what we'll talk about today are, your own needs.
Yeah, I think there's this generation, and I think you and I are part of this generation called the sandwich generation, where as our parents are getting older and living longer, and then a lot of times people our age have also kids to take care of, that we in this generation find ourselves sandwiched between the two and having to be caregivers for both. And so it's challenging, because I always think well, who gives the caregiver support? Where is he or she filling their cup? the first thing is, of course, I'm always going to default to call a doula. This is where a doula can really be helpful. And I think sometimes that is, even if you know about end of life doulas or any other kind of doulas, sometimes it's hard to ask for help because there's this either burden that society puts on us or a burden that the family puts on us or that we put on ourselves to do it all. And I'm wondering why that is. Why do you think people fall into that trap of not asking for help or maybe not knowing that they need help as caregivers?
Yeah, well, a lot of times you just think nobody can do it as well as you can. I certainly felt that with my mom, like, nobody's gonna love on her and take care of her as well as I do or I did, or, my sister was we worked in partnership on that. So the thought of putting our precious mom in the hands of someone else, we're like, "Oh god, no, we need to be there every minute, and make sure she has what she needs the moment she has it." And then she herself was a little particular about who would come to the house and take care of her. She didn't like the idea of having anyone except for my sister and me, um, and our siblings take care of her. So I think that's one aspect of it that's very hard to get over, is allowing strangers, in essence, to come into your home and trust that they're wonderful caregivers. And that's too bad, because there are a lot of wonderful caregivers that will be strangers, but by day 5, man, they're part of the family.
Yeah, I really felt that with my mom because I think we were worried that she would feel that way too. And my dad was her chief caregiver, and he did a really good job. He was really balanced. I felt like um, he was able to not get overwhelmed by a lot of things. But we would have like a physical therapist come to the house, and it was so sweet. My mom liked to collect beautiful things, and her house, we always said it was like an art museum. It just had all of this beautiful folk art all around, and paintings and sculptures and glass. And she loved to show it off. So it was interesting because I would have thought that my mom would have been like your mom and like, oh, I don't want anyone to come in here because there are too many precious things here. But she loved to show off her things. And especially if someone would come in and say, ooh, I like that wall hanging, or I love that lamp. Oh, that made her day. That person was golden in her book. Her physical therapist was she looked forward to her visits every time the woman came to the house. And it was really sweet to see her like that because, yeah, I definitely was worried about people coming because I was worried about how she would react. And then she taught me that it was okay. So, but I see your point. I think that's one of the pitfalls that caregivers can fall into is almost that hero archetype. We think a lot about the archetypes of caregiving, and hero is one of the first things that come to mind. We hear of healthcare heroes, and not all heroes wear capes, and you always think of the caregiver, the person who is either taking care of kids, caregiving in that way, or taking care of someone who may be at the end of life or have a pretty challenging disease or affliction. And I think that can sometimes be challenging to always feel like you have to wear that cape.
Yeah, you gotta send the cape out for dry cleaning every now and again.
And I think it's good, you can be a hero for a while. If you know that your person is very close to dying, yeah, sure. You can put that cape on and be that hero for a finite amount of time, especially when you know that there's an end in sight. But if you don't know, let's say that the one that you love and that you're giving care to has dementia or Alzheimer's, or they just have a chronic disease that needs a lot of care, it's time to take that cape off every now and then.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think, one of the things we can encourage people to do who may have that hero complex when it comes to caregiving is inviting them to accept their own limitations with compassion. They're people too, and they have needs. Caregivers need to sleep. They need to eat healthy foods. They need to drink water and stay hydrated. They need to exercise and move. They need to get out of the house and be with friends and social activities. These are all the things that make life really wonderful and worth living. And I think it's challenging if the caregiver feels that they have to leave all that behind so that they can give care to the person that they love.
I think it's important for us to realize that too, when we become, when we find ourselves in the position of needing a caregiver, we should want our caregiver to take time away and be willing to have somebody from the outside come in and sit with us while our caregiver is out refilling their cup, because because the better the caregiver feels, the better care I'm going to receive. So
Oh, yeah.
it's a two-way street for sure, but gosh, it's a lot easier to say that than to actually achieve it.
Oh, absolutely. I was really proud of my dad because he was able to notice that and he called on me. I would go over every afternoon and just sit with my mom. We would talk, we would laugh, I would sometimes decorate the house. Um, I would help her cook. I could be her hands in the kitchen. And he could go and just do his own thing. He could do his hobbies. He could catch up on bill paying. He could take care of the lawn. He could go grocery shopping, all those things that caregivers need to do, but sometimes feel like they can't leave their loved person. They can't leave the side of their beloved because they're afraid that something would happen in their absence. But I think letting go of that and trusting that other people can help you also live a life while caregiving is important. And I think if you see a friend, let's say you have a friend who's a caregiver for someone in their lives, that you can very gently and sweetly bring them groceries. I saw something on Facebook the other day and I thought it was so wonderful, called grief groceries. And it was this concept where sometimes when we ask people, oh, what can I do? Can I do anything? Can I do anything to help you? That actually puts an extra burden on the person that we're asking, because now we're asking them to also solve the problem and to answer the question of what I need to help you. And that's a lot to ask of someone who's grieving or who's caregiving. But instead, just go grocery shopping. Just drop off some groceries. Comfort foods are always a great choice. I really loved my ice cream when my mom was dying, and it would be nice to have someone just drop off some ice cream at my door, because people don't always know what to do. But I think groceries and comfort food is a great way to show that you care and maybe take something off of that person's to-do list.
It's a great idea. Great idea. Just take the initiative to do it. Don't ask them to come up with a list. You're just, yeah, no need to add one more thing for them to do that day. They already have 50 things on their list.
Oh my gosh, exactly. And they don't need to also take care of you.
Right.
Like, oh my goodness, their plate is full. um, there's another archetype, or shadow archetype, as sometimes we say, and it kind of is along the lines of what we're talking about, but it's the martyr. The person who's kind of like, oh, woe is me. I have to do this all by myself. Kind of like what you mentioned before, is that they may feel that they're the only person who could give this kind of caregiving. They're the only person that can do this, but then they also refuse help because they want to be the one who does it all by themselves. And I wonder if sometimes that just gives them that sense of accomplishment, or maybe that they feel like they are needing to do this. But yeah, have you ever seen that in any of the guests or anyone that you've come into contact with?
I do think that some of us have that habit, and I include myself. Oh yeah, I can do all that. And then in the back of my head, I'm thinking, really, really, I'm going to do that on top of all the other things. Well, then why did you say you're going to do it? Well, because I wanted to look like I can do it all. And well, why do you feel like you need to look that way? Well, I don't know. I just want to. So we can be our own worst enemy by putting forth this persona of the person who can do everything. And when 5 of those things are things you really don't want to do, then, who are you really helping? Maybe there's somebody else who can do one of those things and somebody else who can do another. So, yeah, I've come a long way to delegating and recognizing there's no big award at end of life for wearing yourself out, so knock it off already and share the load. People want to help.
They do want to help.
They need your A-okay to let it happen.
Mhm. I'm telling you, like so when I was recovering from my breast cancer surgery, my sister-in-law came to spend some time with my husband and me. And she was perfect, right? Because I think like my husband was overwhelmed. I was just tired. I didn't have two brain cells to put together. I was so groggy from the anesthesia. And my parents and family were living far away. This is when we were living in California. But she came in and she didn't ask any questions. She just sat down on the couch. She took my feet in her hands and she started massaging them. Boom. No pomp, no circumstance. She just started massaging my feet. And that was the best foot rub I think I've ever experienced in my life. Then, when I had kind of fallen to sleep, she gets up, she goes into our kitchen. She just starts whipping together some dinner. She puts together this amazing chicken and noodle soup, which I still crave. But what I loved about her is she didn't ask for permission. She knew that help was needed and that we were overwhelmed and we didn't know how to ask and we didn't know what to give up or what to ask her to do. And so she just did it. And I'm eternally grateful to her. If you're listening, Janet, I love you. Thank you for that foot rub.
Yeah, those are amazing gifts that people never forget.
Yeah.
And it's good karma. You do that for somebody, then when it's your time, somebody's gonna do it for you.
Well, that was the interesting thing because my mother, when she was dying, she spent a lot of time in bed. She didn't have a lot of energy, as a lot of people at end of life don't have a lot of energy. And my dad and I would play guitar to her and sing to her. And one thing about my mother, she never liked to be touched. Like we didn't really hug, we didn't kiss, we didn't embrace, like we just didn't really touch each other. But in her last few weeks, I got to rub her feet. And I'm telling you, Mary, that was the biggest gift to me that she allowed me to show my love because there were times when I didn't know what to do. I don't know what to do for her. But I did know that I could give a good foot massage because I had learned from the best, my sister-in-law. And and she really enjoyed it. And she let me touch her feet. And that was it was so potent. I really, yeah, so it came full circle. I saw the importance of that, and I knew how much that would mean to her because of how much it meant to me.
That's sweet. That's just, what a thing to have in your memory.
Mhm, mhm, yeah. There's another, negative archetype in caregiving, and that's the role of the parent. And so this is kinda interesting. I have an interesting story about this. So, when my mom was close to death. She had been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease that didn't have a really good prognosis. But she was doing a lot of physical therapy and she was getting stronger. And one day she had a lot of energy and she wanted to redecorate the house. She always liked to decorate the house for all of the holidays. And so we were decorating for fall and I was helping her and she was saying like, get that, I'll bring that over here. And then she was reaching for things and kind of turning and twisting to get things. And then she fell. And she was so mad at herself for falling because she knew that she was pushing herself and then she lost her balance and fell. So then she went to the hospital. She stayed there for the weekend and she came back and she was ready to get back on her feet. She was a little timid, obviously. A fall will do that to anybody. But she was ready to start walking again, to work with her physical therapist, to find that strength. And it was me who was holding her back because I was so traumatized by the fall. You know, you see your mother fall. It's like the worst thing you can see. And I felt like it was my fault and all this stuff. And so as a result of all of that guilt, I didn't want her to walk. I just wanted her to lie in the bed. Oh, I'll give you a foot massage. I'll play music for you. Don't move, don't walk, don't do anything. And when she would walk with a walker, I was hovering around her like a helicopter parent, like, oh, careful. Oh, don't slip there. Oh, that was a small step. Take a bigger step. And I'm sure I was annoying as all get out. But I became kind of a parent, or that parent archetype in this situation.
Well, what would you have done differently?
um, well, now knowing what I know now, I would have embraced that don't know mindset. Like, I don't know. And I know now that it was my perceived guilt for being present when she fell. It was my own phobia or my own trauma from that experience. That was why I was acting that way. And so today, knowing what I know now, I would tell myself to take a chill pill and just embrace that don't know mind, because she knew what she needed. She knew what she could do. And yes, she made a mistake. She pushed herself too far and she fell. But she learned, and she was fine, and she had, all of the support that she needed, with the walker and walls and things. So yeah, I think I just would have just backed away a little bit and told myself to just take a break.
It's a good education, caregiving. You learn everything about everything. You learn a lot about a lot. Maybe that's a better way to put it.
You don't always learn it in the moment. And I think that's why I think the work and the conversations that we have now, allows us to almost forgive our past selves, because my mom and I had a contentious relationship. I mean, at the end, we had such a loving, and we really came together, and we were very loving towards each other. But throughout my whole life and growing up, we didn't always get along. There were times we didn't talk to each other. We were each other's best friends and worst enemies. But I think that, by processing it and thinking about my own mortality and talking about caregiving and how this shows up, knowing that I'm not the only one who's ever felt this way is really helpful.
Yeah, moms and daughters are always a bit tricky to begin with. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's true with just about any family member. There's going to be little bits and pieces that don't quite go as smoothly as you look back and wish they had. But gosh, to be a caregiver is it's such a gift, and you just have to show yourself a lot of grace that you were there to begin with, to be helpful,
and that you gave what you could at the time. It's important to see that and to acknowledge that. Sometimes caregiving falls into the archetype of being the expert. And it's kind of like being the parent, being the expert. Like, I know the best thing for you. I know what medications you should and shouldn't take. I know that you should eat. You got to be strong. You need to eat at the end of life, right, Mary? You got to eat.
No, that is incorrect. But you're right. There are a lot of folks who think that they have all the answers, or they've gone on the Google and they've they found what they were looking for. Yeah, come on, mom, get up, walk around. You can do it. No, no, she can't. She's dying, and this is the end. And what she needs is your support, not your direction. The dying person is in charge of what's going on, and they're not looking for experts anymore. And we're real conscious of that at ABODE. In fact, John Vinson, one of our end of life navigators, whenever I refer to him as an expert, he bristles. He goes, "I'm not an expert," even though he really is. But we all show up with that don't know mindset. We don't have all the answers. We're not in control of anything except to show up as our best selves and do our best in providing the care that you want and that you need, because you've told us, or your hospice has guided us. So we don't need a lot of experts at end of life. It's not a medical event. This is not the time to show how smart you are. It's the time to show how big your heart is.
Absolutely. Gosh, that's beautiful. You have a way with words, Miss Mary. I love it.
I've written a few words in my lifetime, so sometimes they come together, sometimes they don't.
It's funny. Yeah, and I think it comes from fear, right? Because when you're in this position as caregiver, it's not necessarily a role you chose for yourself. You might not have seen that this is what your future was going to be in this role of caregiver. And so sometimes having that expert um, need to be the expert is what comes out when you're faced with this role of being a caregiver. And so I always think like, okay, well, what's the antidote to that? If I'm thinking that I need to be the expert, I'm Googling, I'm being really bossy, what's the antidote to that? And for me, it's gratitude, like just, okay, being grateful for the opportunities that can teach me, being grateful for the care. Let's say that, this loved one is at ABODE, being grateful for the facility of ABODE and the beautiful people who work there, and maybe falling on that. I found gratitude to be a really helpful tool for whenever I feel a little bossy and a little headstrong.
Yeah, it's a tool in many, many situations for sure. I think you're right. It's fear, it's ego, fear that you're not doing enough, fear that you're going to make a mistake. And I always say it's very difficult to make a mistake when somebody's at end of life, as long as your intentions are good. And yeah, that's really what you need to know. There's some mechanics of doing, but the bigger picture is just being with people.
So that brings me to my last one. And we've talked about the good death in previous episodes, but there's this archetype of the priest, and it could be any, any religious leader, but kind of the priest in this way of defining what a good death should be for someone else, what they should do, how they should die, where they should die, maybe not listening to the person who's actually dying, but instead letting your beliefs override the conversation.
Yeah. So tell me more about that, Natalie.
Well, it's interesting. So I actually love this story. When my mom was in the hospital and she was on hospice, so she was general inpatient hospice, a priest came in, probably a chaplain. I don't know if he was a priest, but a chaplain came into our room. And what was hilarious is that my mom was as atheist as they come. I mean, whenever I would want to talk to her about where she thought she would go after she died, she's like, I'm going into the ground. I'm dirt. Like, I'm not, there's no afterlife. That was her belief. And she was very, very steadfast about it. So this priest comes into the room and, he's here like, I'm here to offer support or anything that you might want. And my dad and I kind of look at each other. We're like, no, I don't think that anything like that is needed here. But I got to hand it to this guy because he stayed and he's like, well, what do you believe? Do you have any faith foundations? Where do you believe you'll go? And my dad and I were just thinking, and we're like, you know what? We believe in the religion of love. And the priest was like, tell me about this love thing. And it's like my dad and I laugh about it to this day because we then educated this priest about love and how love is all you need. We're big Beatles fans, of course, but we felt that we are all connected in love, that even when my mom died, that we would still be connected in love, that she returns to the source of all that is love. And so we were talking about that to him, and he was very polite. He was nodding his head, and then he quickly excused himself from the room. I mean, he was there to do a job, and he did a great job, but I could see how that could have gone awry where if he had come and wanted to give her last rites or espouse his personal belief on her, what I loved about this man is that he didn't do that. He asked questions and wanted to know what we thought. But I've heard stories of people who are not religious at all, and they, someone calls a priest, someone calls a rabbi, someone calls an imam, and this person did not want any of that. And so I think it's important to always really honor what the person who's dying, let them be center stage, let them be the star of the show, and let them dictate what they want. And it's also important, as any human being who's going to die, hint, hint, it's all of us, that we make sure that our wishes are known so that people don't feel like they have to make those wishes for us.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. You have to write this down, and you have to make sure people know where it is. And better yet, sit down and go through your hopes and your desires with somebody that will do their very best to carry them out. Yeah, we are still living creatures until we take that last breath. And often we can forget that when folks become unresponsive toward the end, when they fall into that deep, deep sleep, they're still alive. They're still living people, and we need to and should, and out of respect, we should follow what they want, and not try to assume that we know better than what they wanted when they were able to tell us.
Yeah, and not to put our own desires ahead of theirs. Even if they didn't, like my mom didn't tell us exactly what she wanted done, but we knew her. And we knew that, yeah, we wouldn't want last rites for her, and we're not going to make the decision of, well, this is how she should feel, this is how I feel, so this is how she should feel. That you just, the person, and then you honor that. So to recap, Miss Mary, how can caregivers, I guess, identify when they're in these maybe negative archetypes, and then what can they do about it? How can they find self-care? Who can they call?
Well, I think that caregivers, when we start to feel run down, our negative energy is outweighing our positive energy, when we're short with people, including the one that we're caregiving, that's a sign. You've got to stop and take a beat and do something for yourself. Find someone, an ABODE doula, for example, to come and be of assistance to you. And at ABODE, we have a caregiver support group. We have one that will be starting this fall. And so we highly recommend that you visit our website or send an email to info@abodehome.org. And we can tell you more about this wonderful group that has completely changed several of our previous students, changed the way that they think about themselves, and they are now taking better care of themselves, which is so important.
I love that. I love all of the things that ABODE has to offer, and that is one of my favorites. So, Mary, before I go, I would like to truly embrace that don't know mind. I have a tendency to be a little bossy. I'm a Capricorn. I like to run things. I sometimes have the tendency to think that I'm the only one who can do something, or I can do it best. And so I'm going to use this opportunity to embrace the don't know mind, give myself a chill pill, and just be an observer sometimes.
I love that. But I do like for you to be in charge of some things. So don't get any big ideas. You stay in charge of things. Before I go, I will make sure that every time I come across or meet a caregiver, that I say thank you.
Yeah, we don't say thank you enough. So I'm going to say thank you to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Natalie. And thank you, everyone, for listening in. We enjoyed our time together today.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Before You Go, the official podcast of ABODE Contemplative Care for the Dying.
At ABODE, we believe that death is not a medical event. It's a very natural event. So therefore, we are not offering medical advice. We're simply sharing our experiences and knowledge with you before you go.
Make sure to visit us online at abodehome.org, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and while you're there, click that donate button to help us along. This podcast was edited by Make Your Day Richer.